in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go for it.
Hi, everybody out there. Welcome to the very first episode of Bad Movies. This is a brand new show that we've come up with, and the idea behind this show is we're going to highlight some movies that we know are flawed, we know everybody hates, but we like, okay? Because we see there's some little redeeming quality in there, some kind of little piece of pure joy that just makes our heart, and we can't get enough of it, all right? And to my left is my good friend Josh and Tyler, and they're going to be here helping me out here on Bad Movies. Guys, what's your definition, just to start off real quick, what would your definition be of a bad movie that's good?
Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Okay.
I mean, you know, a movie that Edward absolutely poured his heart and soul into, and it was not made cynically. You know,
Right.
This was a movie where there were real issues that were important to him. Glenn and Glenda, another Ed Wood example. But these were films that they were flawed. I mean, you know, he's do like a 2001 or Star Wars story with you know, I should say
Plywood,
shoestring budget,
yeah.
but that's too generous. It's dental floss budget. You know, with nothing, and the gap between what he's trying to do and what he has to work with is just so huge.
So that's part of it. That's part of it. Usually these are kind of low budget things, but not always. Josh, what do you think we should also fold into this kind of definition for the show?
Yeah, some perennial favorites spring to mind. Dune.
Right.
Also Excalibur.
Okay,
And
yeah.
a film
Yeah.
like Dawn of the Dead I would use as
Oh, I
Okay.
love Dawn of the
Okay.
Dead.
the
Yeah.
1978.
Right.
version.
Dawn of the Dead. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Shoestring budget. Yeah.
Shoestring budgets, cheap movies. Okay. The idea is that I think when you boil it down, and I've been thinking about this a little bit. I think the idea when you boil this stuff down is that even though these movies fail, quote unquote, as a movie, as a film, what they're supposed to be doing, actually they succeed in a sort of a back end fashion as art, in a way, because. What they're doing is what they're getting across is something that usually they never even intended to get across, and that is they're holding up a mirror to the society and the nature of the world that they were created in. Okay, and that's the purpose of art. It's to hold up a mirror. I think a big part of it is to let us know about who created it, about what world they lived in, about what they cared about, what they dreamed about. You know, and in that way they can be very effective. You know. And to me, that's something that's very comforting, and that's also something that I find very uplifting, because to my mind, it's you know, even in failure, okay, there's something.
There's success in failure. There's redemption in failure.
Exactly. Even in failure, there's something that's inherently fragile and beautiful about the way that we dream and the way that the human condition relates stories.
Yeah.
Okay, that as long as they're coming from the heart. There is some element that's going to shine through. Even if it's not the story you're trying to tell, you will shine through. And that's, I think, what we're seeing when we see the people that make it. We're actually seeing the people behind these movies. That's why we can respond to them in sort of a visceral way.
But
There was
let's-
some passion somewhere along the line.
Yeah, let's
Exactly, yeah.
Let's not forget that failure is part of the learning process of learning how to eventually do it right. It's like
That's
Tom
true.
Sells has said. You know, I found 9,000 things that didn't work. You know, to find the one thing that did.
Yeah.
you know. So
Right,
failure
right.
is part of the learning process.
Right.
And
It's probably,
we can learn also from the filmmakers' failure as filmmakers.
That's right. Josh?
These things have found a new life in home video. I guess that's sort of obvious, but they've had 3 decades or more to sink into the collective psyche and to we're reflecting on them now.
That's true. And just building on that point, Josh, is the fact that a lot of these things were designed to be entirely disposable, viewed once, and completely forgotten after that season. And it's just the fact that we have this modern technology, video, and then into DVDs and et cetera, now into the internet age where everything's on the internet whenever you want it at the click of a button.
Yeah.
These things live forever in a way they were really never intended to, you know. But
what a huge compliment to them in a way.
It
you know?
is, it is,
Because
it is.
you look, you know, it's like what they say in advertising. You're trying to break through the noise. You're
Yeah.
trying to break through the background noise.
Yeah.
And these are the films that broke through.
They
for
break through
whatever
the noise,
reason,
definitely. They will break through
even
the
though
noise.
they broke through for the reasons other than intended.
Exactly,
You
exactly.
know, that's what makes them so interesting.
Okay,
That's
so
why
I
we love them.
think that's great. I think that what the format here is going to be on our show, guys, is going to be that we're each going to bring per show a few of our favorite quote unquote bad movies,
Guilty pleasures
that we love, and we'll cut them and talk about what we love, what went right, what didn't go right, why they stand out. Okay.
Can I ask you too, just as a
Yes.
framework, like, is there a distinction between a cult classic and a bad movie? Or
Yes, there
bad
is.
at all?
Okay, what do you think, Tom?
Yeah,
What's the
absolutely.
difference? What's the difference?
A cult classic, by definition, is a film that's popular with a minority of viewers.
Uh-huh.
Whereas a bad film or a guilty pleasure is something different. It's a movie that has flaws to it, usually gaping flaws, big flaws, but it's still charming in its flawedness.
Okay.
That's the
Okay,
difference
okay.
between the two.
Regardless of who likes
Now,
it.
the two
So
can
you're saying,
overlap.
like,
A movie
yeah.
can be a cult classic and
They can
a guilty
overlap,
pleasure.
right? Okay,
and a
that's
bad
key.
movie.
That's key. So you're saying, yeah. So maybe
there is a
maybe
difference,
paraphrase, or
important
maybe
difference.
paraphrase what you're saying is that an enthusiast of a cult classic would say that the movie is not bad.
Ah.
You see what I'm saying? They would say that this movie is not flawed. This is like
It's
a great
brilliant
movie.
in
Yeah.
what it is. You know, I would argue that for Plan 9. It's
well,
brilliant
yeah.
film.
Well, we're taking maybe sort of like an in-between thing here,
Yeah.
maybe. Perhaps. Anyway, we'll find out as the show
Semantics.
goes on. Yeah, exactly. We'll find out as on. Anyway, let's get the ball rolling here, and I'm going to introduce my first movie. I don't know if you know this or not, but William Shatner has just celebrated his 80th birthday.
Wow.
80 years on the planet for Mr. Shatner. Yeah.
Way to go, Captain
Yeah.
Kirk.
Way to go, Captain Kirk. And so I'm going to do an all Shatner lineup for my movies today.
Yeah.
Out of respect for that.
Shat
and deference.
tribute.
A Shat tribute.
That's Shatnering.
Yeah,
Shatnering or
A
illusionings.
The first one is my first one is Kingdom of the Spiders. Kingdom of the Spiders.
I might have picked that one myself.
This is the definition of great bad movie. I have loved this movie for 20 years. Okay?
Isn't it cheese on top of cheese?
It's cheese on top of cheese on top of cheese with some slices of Shatner every 5 minutes in between. You know.
And what goes better with cheese than Shatner?
Exactly. Yeah.
Nothing.
Well, the thing is, one of the great parts is like, okay, first of all, for Kingdom of the Spiders, what happens to Spiders is, this first of all, to give you a little history about it, Jaws was a huge hit. Okay, so they had Jaws. Now you had this whole thing that came after Jaws for the next few years in the 70s of
Scary animals, creature features.
nature on attack. Nature goes on attack. Killer bee movies. We had the killer sharks, so now we have to do killer bees. There's the grizzly, the killer bear. You know, there's ants. Phase 4. You know, the one with
I
the
like
killer
that one a
ants.
lot, actually. Yeah.
You know, so they just go down the line. But this one was spiders. Okay, now they're not spiders. They're
Well,
not
no,
like
they're tarantulas.
They're just regular sized tarantulas. And so the idea is that they
Tarantulas
have,
are big spiders for spiders.
well, they're
yeah.
big spiders for spiders, but they actually use real tarantulas in the
Yeah.
movie. They weren't like fake spiders. So what they did was they just got a ton of tarantulas, and they're basically just throwing them on people. People are just rolling around on tarantulas. I mean, tarantulas, you just see them just getting smushed. I mean, they're just getting killed. I mean, it's like, it's extremely politically incorrect by today's standards, but in the middle of this
We're the
whole
animal
thing,
rights people for this one.
they were existed. But you know what you have there is one of the great things. There's a couple moments that I love. One of them, which is that you can tell you're in a bad movie when somebody looks at the phone. Okay, and I'll explain that in a second. Shatner, there's a calf that's killed by the spiders. It's like the first thing that's killed is this calf. Okay, it's brought down by these spiders. All right, and and Shatner is the local vet of the town. Okay, and so they bring him in. They bring this cow in, and he's looking at the cow. You know, he's looking at the cow.
I just laugh and think
I
of
know.
remembering
Exactly.
the movie.
Yeah, he's looking at the cow. Right? He's looking at the cow. You know,
It's terrible.
it's true. Yeah, but he's looking at this cow. Does these tests, and he sends the tests off to Flagstaff. You know, because the tests always have to go to Flagstaff.
Oh,
It doesn't
yeah.
matter what the movie is.
Very
You've got to
realistic.
send those tests to Flagstaff. And Shatner is on the phone, and he says he gets the results back from the test, and he's on the phone like this, and he goes, "Well, thanks for that, man." I don't know what he says, but then he goes like this. Boom, and follows the phone all the way down into the hang-up. You know you're in a bad movie when people are watching the phone as they hang up the phone. You know what I mean?
desperately
That's the
searching for
climactic
motivation.
moment
Exactly.
of the
Yeah.
scene.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
The
They're
slow
watching the
hanging up
phone.
of the
Yeah,
phone, you know.
Yeah.
His hand
And
is acting.
This all culminates in the entire town being overrun by these tarantulas.
And the ending.
Pandemonium.
Oh, and the ending.
The shocker ending. The
Oh,
shocker
yeah.
ending. Spoiler alert.
Oh.
But
I remember
remember
laughing at the ending when I saw
Well,
it.
at
I was
the end
like,
of it, they-
this is supposed to scare me.
Yeah, at the end
and
of
I'm
it, they
just,
pull
and
back.
I'm just like laughing with, with the,
he looks out.
dumbfounded by
They
the stupidity.
get trapped in this farmhouse by the tarantulas. Okay, they board up the windows and they sort of live overnight. The tarantulas are attacking. Okay, they make it through. Then in the morning they're like, well, what are we gonna do? He pulls off one of the boards.
And he says,
pulls
"Oh
it
my
down, And he's
God!"
like, oh my God. And then it shows what he's seeing, and what he's seeing is a matte painting, bad one, of the entire town
The whole world is
covered with spider webs. You know, so it's like they do this background of they pan back, and it's just supposed to make you just be like, oh, we are so screwed. It's like they are coming to get me next.
Oh,
you
and
know?
we have no chance against
We have
these
no chance
tarantulas.
against the spiders.
Yeah.
Now, another thing I would like to also
but instead
mention.
of being horrified, I was just laughing, you know?
yeah.
It's
It's-
the-
yeah.
You know, and when you make a cheesy movie, you know, can you do better than William Shatner?
You can't.
I don't think so.
But why is it
Maybe
good?
a few
That's the
people,
question.
not many.
What's that?
You know?
Why is it good?
Why is it good? I think, well, I'll tell you, there's a few reasons why it is good. And one of them is, first of all, is the soundtrack. It's done by these I think it's, the Dorset. The Dorset brothers were like a pretty successful country duo, and so they have a few great songs
Yeah.
on that soundtrack.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's nice about it is Tiffany Bowling, love interest. Now, if you're familiar with 70s schlock cinema at all, Tiffany Bowling was a playmate in the early 70s, and beautiful blonde. And she was in a ton of these horrible movies in a row where she was always slashed or killed or something like that. She would usually take her top off and get killed in the next scene. But she plays the spider expert, you know, because you always have the beautiful woman who comes in as the spider expert. That actually reminds me of Alligator, which is another one of these. And again, in Alligator, you have the beautiful scientist who is the alligator expert, which leads the chief of police in that one to say, listen, I didn't say she was normal. I only said she had the word on alligators. You know, same kind of thing here where they bring her in as the spider expert, and she's sitting here going, this shouldn't be happening, and all this stuff.
And she's clearly a
then, of
playmate,
course,
but that's
then she
the
falls in
charm and
love. She
cheekiness
falls
of
in
it.
love with Shatner in about 10 seconds, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And the other thing is,
he was Captain Kirk.
the other thing is,
Every episode.
and I'll give you this. I'll give you this. The other thing is, I can remember watching this as a kid in the '70s, a small kid, but I remember watching this as a kid. And you know, there is a general kind of visceral creepiness you get to some of these shots where you have.
It does kind of work.
Well, it does on its own level because what
creepy
they do is,
way, you
I'll
know?
tell you what. In one shot, I think specifically stands out to just about everybody. They have a small girl and she's on a bed, and there's probably 100 tarantulas on the bed, you know, and she's kind of been cornered, and she has to kind of jump off the bed into Shatner's arms. I don't think anybody can seriously look at that shot and not kind of feel like a kind of a knee-jerk reaction down deep, being like, ooh, you know what I mean? So there is kind of that ooh factor.
It does have a linear plot structure,
yeah.
and it does kind of work as a little cheesy
Well,
horror
the thing
film.
is,
you
well,
know?
the thing is this though, and the other thing is, given the time, and this is one of those things where it's like the constraint becomes a plus. They're real spiders.
Yeah,
They're not rubber spiders.
Yeah, they're the real thing.
They're real
They
thing.
move.
They're
You
not
see them
they're
move.
not CGI spiders.
Yeah.
You know, it's like if you made it today with CGI spiders, it would be completely toothless. But the fact is that they had all these tarantulas, and they're actually throwing 50 tarantulas on somebody before a scene. And it's like you can just imagine. It's
Hitchcock
like
style.
Yeah, it's just like you just wouldn't want 50 tarantulas on you. You know what I mean? And so it's like that alone.
49,
creeps you out.
sure, but 50.
So
I broke the
anyway,
line, you know?
the performances are spot on. And I'll say this right now: I personally feel Shatner's a good actor. Okay, I think he is. And the reason I'll say that is this: you never have trouble imagining what Shatner wants you to imagine. You see what I'm saying?
He communicates.
He communicates, exactly. And the thing is they said one time I was listening to an interview with Shatner, and they said, why'd you go so nuts all the time? And he said, and they're talking about Star Trek years, and he said, listen, man, the rocks were paper mache. The monster was a shag carpet, okay? If I didn't freak out, who would? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
if I wasn't the one that freaked out, it's like nobody at
No
home
one
would
until
care.
TV
They
Land's
wouldn't
going
care.
to.
Yeah, they wouldn't care. He had to be that over.
He had
the
to
top.
overact. He had to overact.
Okay, so that's
It was
King of the
appropriate.
Spiders. Go home, watch it, rent it, get it from Netflix or whatever.
You know,
It's a key.
I would like this. You know, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I like the movie a lot
Yeah.
too. I really did.
Yeah.
And I agree with what you're saying because Vincent Price did the same things in his movies. He gave the appropriate campy performance for the appropriate campy film, and
Right.
appropriate campy director.
Yeah.
That's what was required. He did it. It worked for what it was.
Exactly.
You know,
he's a
and
pro. You know,
yeah, you
it's
know,
like a
and
pro.
you know, and I gotta say, you know, I really like King of the Spiders, but my reason for liking it so much is because I love tarantulas.
Well, there you go. Well, there you go. Yeah.
I have a tarantula fetish.
You're
you know,
tarantula
and the thing is I know enough about tarantulas that they're not communal animals. They fight each other when
Yeah,
they
they
see
fight
each
each other, and
so to
so-
get these things together and to get them to look like they're working as a team, in itself is a huge
Big-time spider
accomplishment.
wrangling, yeah.
It's not easy. You know, most people don't know how hard it would have been probably to shoot some of these scenes because these things turn on each other.
That's a good point. Let's move on, though. Let's move on. Let's get some more bad movies
Okay.
in this bad movie show.
Zardoz.
Tyler, bring up one.
Mine is
Zardoz.
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 Yeah. they're waiting. The MST 3000 guys are waiting for Sean Connery to die so they can slam this one. Well, that's the only reason. Hasn't been slammed so far. Sean Connery finished his Bond thing. And
Okay,
said,
so Zardoz is just filming probably about what, 72?
74.
74, okay.
1974 came out.
John Borman.
John Borman directed it. He just finished. John Borman just finished Deliverance. And they got Connery for scale.
Right.
He said, "I want to do movies. I don't want to do anything like James Bond, though. No
Right.
spy parts, no action hero parts. I want to do something different." And they told him, "You're through, Sean. You're a pretty boy. You had your run. You're done.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
never going to work again.
Yeah.
Not only aren't we giving you any parts that are different, we're not giving you anything the same.
Right.
Nothing." And
Yeah.
the only offer he got was Zardoz. And this is the funny thing.
That was different. That was different, trust me.
Yeah,
You get a
you have a
flying
stone head that floats around and spits out
Throws up guns.
It spits
out
out
of
guns
his
and,
mouth.
and ammo out of his mouth.
Yeah.
And says to the people under him, these brutal barbarians, "The gun is good, the penis is evil."
Yeah, I think that might be the first line of the movie or something like that. It's right towards the beginning. Yeah. So the gun is good, the penis is evil. Now
It
we've
spreads
got
forth its seed upon the
got
world.
ourselves a bad movie
Bringing,
here. Yeah.
bringing the world out of balance.
Exactly.
So you must bring things back into balance. So their job is population control, which means, boys and girls, death squads.
Exactly, death squads.
So Connery is in charge of a group of barbarians who are in charge of a death squad, and their job is to go around and shoot and kill everyone.
Not to mention
but
fact-
he's not the villain of the story.
He's not the villain story. Not to mention the fact that while he's wearing a crimson red G-string thing that comes up with the suspenders up the back or something. I can remember I first saw Zardoz in high school. We rented it with a couple of buddies of mine, and
This is a movie
had
people
no
either
clue.
love or hate.
Had no. Well, we liked it because it's wall to wall boobs for one thing.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
another thing. It's like it's wall to wall full frontal nudity
Yeah.
throughout this movie because it's like the early '70s. It's very arty. So it's wall to wall nudity. So as like 17-year-olds, we watched it,
Yeah.
the whole thing. But a buddy of mine was saying, I think we were working in a pizza parlor a couple of years later, and there was some movie du jour that was out that he had seen and didn't like, and he made this announcement. He said, "That's one of the worst movies I've ever seen, and I've seen Zardoz." I mean, it's like, Zardoz is just one of these kind of, for most people, it's basically just going to be impenetrable, but it's a glorious mess. And, what do you think? You've seen?
You're watching a thinking person's movie. Or there's some big ideas behind it. I think at the time when I saw it, I wasn't too sure what those were.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's great. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
The premise of Zardoz was actually that if people could be immortal, they would do it. But it's the whole idea of be careful what you wish for; you might actually get it, as the ancient Greeks said. And after 1,000 of being alive, they decided, hey, maybe we want to try death because this sucks.
Yeah. But you got to remember that you're saying, but you remember though. I mean, that's probably that's pretty accurate. But at the same time, you're basically going through 2 hours of film that doesn't say any of that. Nobody ever really spells that out. You know what I mean?
Well, they kind of. It's subtle, but it's
It's
weaved
in there.
all the way through
It's
the film.
weaved in all the way through there, but it's like you really have to be on your game.
Yeah,
when
you
you're watching
really do.
out.
The thing was you could see the filmmakers who made this. This was not a cynical film designed to make money. This was an art film. They were taking huge risks.
Again,
and even a movie that's a complete disaster where they take those risks, and they're passionate about what they're doing. It's like, even if I hate the film, I respect them for what they did.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the thing was I really liked Zardoz when I saw it.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I like the whole thing of it's based on The Wizard of Oz.
Right,
I thought that was very clever. And it's interesting, Connery to this day, he still lists that as one of his all-time favorite films. And even though he went kicking and screaming into doing the movie, he just finished the Bond films. This was the only offer he got.
Right.
And he said, I want to do something that's completely different. I want to do something that's really different. And I want to play the bad guy. And then he's doing it. He's like, wait a minute. I'm
guys
in a
which?
red diaper.
Yeah.
I've got a ponytail.
Exactly.
I'm wearing hooker boots.
Yeah.
And I'm worshiping a stone god that's spitting out guns and telling me that the gun is good. Now go forth. He's like, this movie's out on freaking Pluto. He complained to the filmmakers, look, when I said I wanted to do something completely different, I didn't think you could do it.
Well,
you did.
it's like, and that's it's kind of what I was getting back to. What I was talking. It's like you can look at a movie like Zardoz, and you can pin it exactly early '70s. That's the only time
They were experimenting.
That movie
Studios
could have
were-
been
yeah,
made.
Yeah, yeah.
You
Where
see
they
what
would
I'm saying?
take these risks.
That's the only time that movie could have been made.
Yeah.
Was the early '70s, because you were coming right off the '60s and all those hippies and all that.
And the whole Vietnam questioning authority.
Yeah, all that kind of was going into that. You know what I mean?
And the willingness to risk, the willingness to question, to experiment.
Well, it culminates with that genocide or the mass murder, whatever that really stands out.
Yeah.
You reminded me that the people were sort of inviting.
They were inviting them to come kill them because they'd been alive for 1,000 years, and after 1,000 years of doing the same thing every day, they were sick of it.
Ready to go.
They were ready for something different,
Wow,
and
there you
that, to me, was a daring
So,
idea. But
So another one,
But
the other one,
Jones
yeah.
and so
I
on.
just want to say real
Yeah.
quick, Oliver Stone, after he saw this film,
Uh-huh.
he stood alone in defending the movie, and I mean alone. And
Yeah.
he said, I took every screenplay I'd ever wrote and I threw them in the trash after I read Zardoz. He said, Zardoz is the best film I've ever seen. He says it's brilliantly written. And he says the only thing the movie is guilty of is it's too far ahead of the learning curve for the audience of the day.
Well, and you know what?
This is
I
Oliver
think-
Stone,
yeah,
what he
and
said.
I say, even though it was made in the early '70s, I think to this day it's still ahead of the learning curve. So
Absolutely.
it's still maybe another
I
30
think
or
it's
40 years
interesting
to
if
go.
you
You know?
look, I went on the internet and read reviews of Zardoz, and it was amazing because it was either 1 star or 5 stars.
Yeah.
People absolutely thought this was a masterpiece, or they thought it was the worst piece of crap they'd ever seen in their life.
Yeah, totally.
And there was just no middle ground, you know.
Okay, so folks at home, Zardoz, that's number 2 for today. Obviously, check that out. It's good for some jaw droppers.
One more thing,
Todd, because we got to move
Oliver
on.
Stone, he said this was the first movie I ever saw. Bad guy, the villain, was the main character, and he said
That's
that was
cool.
his inspiration for all the movies he did after
Right.
that. So everything Stone did after 1974 was based on Zardoz.
Okay, great.
So that's
All
a
right,
little
Josh,
footnote.
why don't you bring up?
Too bad about that movie Alexander that he went on to.
Well, he was the bad guy. He was the bad guy.
That's a guilty displeasure for me.
I think one of my guiltiest pleasures, or most pleasurable guilty, is the 1984 film Dune
Yeah,
by David Lynch.
Dune. Yep.
Dune. Lynch had the
a flawed movie that has some great moments. You know,
the
So David
Herculean
Lynch, go ahead,
task
Josh,
of filming an almost unfilmable book,
Right.
Frank Herbert's science fiction epic about an intergalactic savior on a desert planet.
Muad'Dib.
The Muad'Dib, who may be the Kwisatz
Kwisatz
Haderach.
Yeah.
And
We're geeks, folks. In case you hadn't figured that out, we're nerds.
Yeah, I spent
We can all pronounce Kwisatz Haderach properly.
When I was 15, my parents got me a book on sex, and instead of reading it, I read Ray Bradbury. That's how much of a sci-fi geek I am. I didn't even want to read the book on sex and puberty.
There you go.
I wanted to read Bradbury.
Ray Bradbury,
I wanted to read George Orwell. Okay, go on.
And I think it's
okay.
as iconic as Herbert's book is, and as trend-setting as it was, it's influenced so many things. The movie stands alone as its own portrait of this
I think
universe.
you're right. It does. It does. I think they are separate. I mean, I remember reading the book, and in some ways, I was a little turned off by the book. It was a little too brutal for me, and it was kind of.
Weird religious tie-ins
Yeah,
and metaphors.
all that stuff. And you know what I think is great about Dune is that I remember when Dune came out, and this was right in the middle of Star Wars mania. Okay, so this was right in the middle where studios were willing to bankrupt. I mean, it did bankrupt.
Bankrupt. You said it
I
right
think
the
it
first
did
time.
bankrupt. United Artists, maybe. I think it bankrupted somebody. But, they were ready to bankroll space epics. It's like any space epic was going to get green-lighted, you know. And so they've got this David Lynch, who at the time had done maybe The Elephant Man
think so,
and
yeah.
Eraserhead, you know. So
That's
he's like
all
this,
he had done.
It's
Yeah,
pre-Blue Velvet.
Pre-Blue Velvet, right? But so they've got this like young, hip
Promising.
director, right? They let him helm this thing. Now, from what I understand about Dune, it was just a boondoggle. It was 3 years in Mexico City. Half the crew was from Italy, half the crew was from Mexico, and then some other guys from. There was 3 different languages being spoken on set. Nobody knew what the hell on. Some of the stuff, the monsters were being built in Italy. They would bring them over. They wouldn't work.
They spent 3 years grooming a small section of desert to film some of these things.
Yeah, exactly.
Or 3 months,
They ripped
yeah.
out all the sagebrush for it to
Yeah.
make it look completely sterile.
Yeah, and so they're doing all these monumental things, and then like they'll have like 5 seconds shot there. You know what I'm saying? After and then they'll move on. I mean, the thing is, I watched Dune the other day because Josh said that he was going to bring it up, and I have it at home because it is one of my favorite movies.
I have my own copy.
Yeah, I have my own copy. You know, what I love about Dune is that it was really this. You know, what I love is when there's a dichotomy between the movie the studio thinks they have and the movie that they actually have.
Yeah.
Because the marketing behind Dune was, this is a space romp. This is a space, fantasy. This is going to be fun. This is going to be another swashbuckling, adventurous movie. Let's go. There's planets. There's spaceships. There's robots. There's lasers. There's giant worms. And then
There's intergalactic battles like Star Wars.
There's intergalactic battles, and then you get there and you get mutants, you get people with their faces melting off, you get a guy who's covered with warts, ripping people's hearts out, and it's a horror movie. It's a horror movie, and that they were marketing to like 12-year-olds, and so all these 12-year-olds went to it, like me.
I remember the toys.
Yeah,
even.
the toys even. They even had toys of like little Baron Harkonnen, so you could have him rip out somebody's heart plug. How fun! I mean, it's like
and watch them die.
That's what because you're getting off on it sexually. You know what I mean? And so it's like, this is the perfect summer movie, isn't it? And so it's like just that complete dichotomy between reality. It's like that. It's just like almost a setup for a colossal failure.
Well,
I read that.
I mean, Dune was really weird. It had a lot of those elements, but my main complaint was they really needed to make it a 3.5 or 4 hour movie. I mean, to really do novel justice. And when they did the TV movie of Dune, even though they didn't,
about 2000,
when they didn't, even though they didn't have the budget to really do it right, they did it right. It was dramatically,
towards the book, it was much more successful as far as that.
It was very close to the book.
But still, if I'm going to watch Dune, though, I'm going to watch the movie.
I'm going to watch both versions. I'm going to watch both versions.
And like you said, the studio thinks that the De Laurentiis family thinks they're getting this epic space opera, and what you get is the twisted psyche of David Lynch.
Yeah, exactly. David
all
Lynch.
his psychological fixations.
And $30 million to waste on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you have these.
No, the budget was a lot higher than that.
So
I mean,
you have
intergalactic
religious cults, you have drug use, transcendence, you have traveling without moving, a galactic savior,
folding space,
and you have some sort of a metaphor of the Arab oil crisis.
Exactly, there's all that stuff. It's like how could you make sense of that in a movie? How could you?
Well, I like what one person said about Dune. They said, I've read all, and I've read all the interviews with Frank Herbert, and I still couldn't make heads or tails of this film.
And yet, I'll just say, the reason I'm plugging for it is because there are, despite all this, and maybe because of all this, there are moments in Dune where the music and the visuals and the ideas come together where I'm just completely transported.
There are moments when it does work, and you can see what he was trying to do. You can see how cool it would have been. You got Toto to do the music, which is at the time was a big 80s band, and Toto's a good band.
Synthesizer music.
The soundtrack is awesome.
The music
the soundtrack is
great.
The
production
Savior
values, the
theme,
special effects. I love Dune.
Yeah.
But it is confusing, and that's what really.
It's a mess. It's another glorious mess.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's what it really is.
And it's like unless you read the novel, and really understood what's going on, you're lost in this film. Let me say, when I watched it in the theater, I forgot who the Quizart Satarak was.
Yeah,
okay?
right.
Yeah.
And I'm watching that scene where. Where someone says he really is the Quizart Satarak.
He was born smart.
And I'm like, okay, he could be the double Satarak for all I know.
Right, exactly.
What is the Quizart Satarak?
They never say. Right.
They say at the beginning 2 hours earlier,
they said at the
but
beginning,
you forget after watching all the heart plugs and all the deformities what the
skin
Quizart
diseases,
Satarak means. I was like, when I heard that, I was just like, what?
Yeah. And Lynch
is that good?
Even more. Lynch pushes his actors.
Does that mean,
Lynch is known for pushing his really strange, self-conscious, twisted parodies of their own performances.
That's true. You were talking about this. So expand on that a little bit, Josh. So.
For example, in a movie like Blue Velvet, at the end where you have there's this whole '80s pastiche and the reference to the bluebird of happiness, and then you even see this animatronic happy bird chirping at the end, and Laura Dern's performance is so over the top, you're left wondering, is this a self-parody? Or is it unself-conscious camp?
Yeah.
And it just
what is it doing? I mean, what you have there is Lynch.
Yeah,
what you have there is Lynch being Lynch.
Yeah, when I watch Lynch, I'm like, is he trying to be funny?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Or does he just doesn't know?
You extrapolate that forward. I mean, you extrapolate that forward in time to movies like Mulholland Falls, where he's now he's allowed to completely freak out and give us his palette the way he wants to arrange it. And you see this kind of sort of dream state that he's operating from and how that was sort of creeping into these movies inappropriately, probably in a movie like Dune. But exactly what he's seeing is David Lynch, in a way, is being bared in Dune, I think, successfully. Okay, and so again, a great bad movie. A great bad movie. A great bad movie. Okay, my second movie that I would like to pick.
Another Shatner.
Another Shatner movie. Now this one is it's pretty hard to track down. Okay, it's pretty hard to track down. It's called Impulse. Is probably the name that you can probably most find it under.
So this
you know.
isn't under the radar; it's off the radar.
This is off the radar.
Not the vampire.
It's not the vampire movie. What the plot of this one is that okay, this one's from the early '70s again, the golden age, you know, and this is you got to think about Shatner at this point. He's done with Star Trek. Okay, he can't get a job. He's doing plays. He's gone back to doing plays and road shows and stuff, and he's doing theaters. And from what I understand, he's got a camper and he's like traveling around. He's doing college tours.
And this was
you know,
pre the motion picture.
No. This is not just pre motion picture. This is pre the sci-fi cons. We started making some real.
This was
money.
even before like the
So
sci-fi.
he was desperate at this point.
There was like a few. He was
Yeah.
desperate. So he takes this part in this movie where not only that, but then you can also see. Listen, I was the good guy, and so there's always that thing of in a lot of great movies you have the guy who is always the good guy who wants to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
And so you can just tell. You can just see Shatner's like, okay, I'm going to take this role because it's completely the opposite of everything I usually do. And it's going to be arty and edgy and hardcore. He plays a serial killer who befriends rich widows and then he kills them for the money, okay? And in the meantime, he has like this real estate scam on the side, okay? It's wall-to-wall polyester. You know, Shatner wears
he was
jumpsuits.
desperate when
He
he
wears
did this.
jumpsuits.
He
He wears
was-
jumpsuits and pimp hats for the entire movie. Plaid, bell-bottom polyester jumpsuits. Okay.
His own wardrobe, maybe.
It probably was his own order from home. And then the other thing is just the ineption of the dialogue. Okay, it's beyond. He gets in fights with like his main antagonist in the movie is a 9-year-old girl who has figured out that he's the killer. Okay. And he gets in fights where they're like, "You better shut up. You better shut up." And she's like, "You shut up." He's like, "You shut up." You know?
No,
I mean,
you.
it's like, yeah, exactly. That's the level of dialogue. Now, you know you're rocking and rolling though. Okay, now that's one thing. You've
But-
got
but
Shatner.
it's
no, listen,
funny.
It's, you know, you've got Shatner in the leisure suits killing women. Now you know you're rocking and rolling because halfway through the movie, Odd Job from Goldfinger shows up in a Winnebago with a sign on the side of the Winnebago that says Karate Pete. Okay? He rolls into town as Shatner's ex-partner in crime, wanting to get back in with Shatner, even though Shatner set up his own new scam. And so Shatner has no choice but to kill Odd Job, who is the huge Japanese guy from Goldfinger. That's what I'm saying. I don't know the actor's real name.
Throws
I can't
the
remember.
hat.
The guy who throws the hat in Goldfinger, you know, that big beefy
The
guy.
Korean bodybuilder.
The Korean bodybuilder guy. And he is, you know, he's taking this, you know, he's done with that. But now he's Karate Pete. Okay, that's his name in the movie, Karate Pete.
Yeah.
And he shows up in his Winnebago and starts going after Shatner. Shatner has no choice but to kill him in a car wash. Okay, first he tries to hang him. Okay, but Karate Pete has a knife in his boot, so he cuts the rope. Okay, then Shatner chases him through the car wash.
Yeah.
The speed you go through a car wash. Not like, you know what I'm saying?
Slow.
On the car wash
In a
track.
car?
In a car. Shatner's in a car. He's running through the things like this, covered with soap. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just one thing after another.
Cheese on top of cheese.
It's just one thing after another. And of course, at the end you can't end any of these without the head in the fish tank. killed.
And you
what
know,
I mean? You got that.
you
at
know
the
how
end.
big
Horrific.
and strong Shatner is compared with the actor who plays Odd Job.
Oh yeah, Shatner's probably, you know, it's like Odd Job.
This guy
is
could
just-
break
yeah,
his neck in a
yeah,
second, you
Absolutely,
know?
absolutely. So anyway, listen, Impulse is.
But it's the fight.
Oh yeah, Shatner kills him. Absolutely, Shatner kills him. Listen, all I'm saying is, if you get a chance, Impulse, okay? Impulse is
Spoiler alert!
you like it because it is so very
Ridiculous.
bad.
I do like it because it is so very bad, but at the same time, like I said, I am a fan of Shatner's acting. Okay, I really do. I really have watched enough of it over years. I grew up a Star Trek fan. That's when I first got introduced to him. But I also liked, you know, the Twilight Zones that he was in. He was in a couple great Twilight Zones. And I think if anybody thinks that Shatner's a bad actor, watch Airplane 2. He gives hilarious. I mean, he comes in 10 minutes and hits home run after home run after home run after home run. Every line.
Shatner is
you
a
know.
very good
Yeah.
comic actor.
He's an excellent. He has excellent comic timing. I mean, it's like he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing.
And he
you
doesn't
know?
take one of the reasons he's such a good comic actor because he doesn't take himself seriously.
He doesn't
you know?
take himself seriously. I mean, he understands his roles, like we were saying earlier. But I'm saying anybody that I think the movie
Yeah,
opens
he
up.
was very good in Airplane 2.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah,
The movie opens up with one of those little mini cigars, watching a belly dancer, from about 3 feet away, and then like he's in the car with the belly dancer in the next scene. She's like his girlfriend on the side, this rich girlfriend doesn't know about, and so he has to kill her, and then it's just the whole thing is a mess. But
What is the impulse? What's the tie-in there?
the impulse is that he gets the impulse to kill.
Okay.
So it's like he'll get that impulse,
And then he does it.
and then he has to kill. It's like he'll snap, and then when he snaps, when he snaps, he reverts to a 3-year-old, and so he starts like sucking his thumb. I mean, I'm telling you,
Wow.
this is
really over the top.
I'm telling you, this is a great bad movie. Okay?
I haven't seen it. I got to rent it now.
Well, we'll see. We'll show some clips during the show. But yeah, anybody, you gotta watch this one.
But this
Nice.
is a movie both of us have seen. Mine.
Yeah. Okay. Next one.
Star Crash.
Star Crash.
I mean,
Yeah, Star
imagine
Crash.
a spaghetti western low grade Z ripoff of Star Wars coming
Italian
out.
movie.
Italian, yeah, that's
yeah.
my spaghetti western. Star Crash. This movie, most people hated this movie, but it's charming in its cheesiness.
It is charming
and
in
it
its
has a
cheesiness.
lots of nods and winks to other genre films like Ray Harryhausen's stop motion animation. There's like a stop motion animation monster in this.
You have a giant. I think you have a giant robotic centaur.
Yeah. With a giant sword throwing it down at Carolyn Monroe.
Let's not forget Carolyn Monroe.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the reason to watch Star Crash and her bikini.
Yeah, that
Her
was
Barbarella
Her
informed.
Well, that was
Barbarella.
to me.
This is what Barbarella wore
That
for
was
underwear.
that was the reason I watched this movie a couple times in the theaters because
Yeah.
Carolyn Monroe. I was a teenager, And,
She's gorgeous.
And yeah, she is gorgeous, but she's wearing this black leather bikini, and it really
And,
shows
like,
off her
thigh-high
figure.
boots,
And she is hot
Yeah.
looking in this. And Marjo Gottner and Carolyn Monroe are such opposites as actors. They're
Yeah.
so completely different, and to cast them right next to each other as a team playing off each other was just genius casting.
And let's not forget young David Hasselhoff.
Yeah, their first film, I
this
think.
one, yeah.
And the thing was, I remembered him from that in everything I saw afterwards, and I always referred to him as the guy from Star Crash. And to most people, they'd never seen this film or heard of it. But but the thing was I actually talked with the filmmakers who made this one, believe it or not, and they intended for it to be campy. They intended for it to be cheesy. They wanted to make it. They didn't know what they were doing, even though they did. Like the scene when they say that at night the temperature drops thousands of degrees. Well, it's 230 degrees below zero to absolute zero.
Yeah.
You can't drop thousands of degrees. But they knew that, and they threw that in there just so people would laugh at that. You see what I'm saying?
I think that there is. What I like about what I think is charming about Star Crash is that you have what I think you can tell, and this kind of gets back to what I was saying earlier, is that Star Wars came out and just lit a fire under everybody's in 1977. Okay, all these young.
And let's not forget
filmmakers.
this was a Star Wars ripoff.
This was a Star Wars ripoff, totally a Star Wars ripoff.
Absolutely.
Star
Star-
Crash, Star
yeah,
Wars. Okay?
It was it scooped Star Wars in a sense.
Well, they
right?
knew Star Wars was coming out. They knew that they had the script, and they basically ripped it off.
Well-
as a cheap version before it came out
Well,
to
they-
try and
they-
grab its thunder.
You could see that. The kids had seen these shots, okay, from Star Wars.
Yeah.
And they were trying to replicate them, but they're doing it with sort of 1950s. It's kind of what the nice thing about the space shots is they're kind of a cross between 1950s wires, but with the models detailed the way they were in Star Wars. And so you get
Not
this
quite
kind
as
of
good, but
no,
yeah.
obviously not quite as
They
good.
couldn't
But you can
afford
see that
the,
that's what they were trying to do. That's
They're trying to go for the space battles of Star Wars, but they didn't have near the budget.
Yeah, with like
And
They
it
didn't
was
have
la-
the
it was just
proprietary
laughable.
motion control.
And they had
None of
cameras,
that, none of that.
Yeah, none of that. Nothing that sophisticated. They had a giant fist, the fist of
Yeah,
the spaceship of the bad guys.
The Death Star is a hand.
It
that is
closes
like this.
during battle
So
to
it's
hit
like
someone.
you do need a space hand that's floating in space. I guess that is. There's
Talk
that,
to the hand,
there is
not
that,
me, the hand.
There is that.
Tell the hand.
What is that? There's that Star Trek. Remember that one where it's like the hand
yeah.
Coming at him, yeah.
and it's like grabs them.
Yeah,
So maybe
that's-
something like that. But,
They should have had the
epic.
hand flip the bird right before the battle. They considered doing that, but they didn't.
It's like I remember. It's like and that's kind of like what we used. It's like it kind of harkens back to you could have this kind of stuff, this giant hand, and it was. I mean, it was absurd, I think, at the time, but not quite as absurd as it looks today. I mean,
But
one
it
of
was
the things,
meant to be absurd, even.
it was sort of meant to be absurd,
It
tongue in
was-
cheek,
it-
but not quite as absurd as it actually ends up being.
Yeah. But by the way, who did the score for that? It was John Williams, I think. Actually,
You know what it was?
the same
No,
guy who did
it was
John
James
Barry.
Horner. James Horner.
James
Horner. Yeah.
yeah,
who went on to
great
do
score
a
though.
great score. Yeah.
You know, the
yeah.
score in it was really quite good.
I
You know,
think it's
the performances by Carolyn Monroe and David Hasselhoff and all the characters in there were quite good. But the thing that I thought was interesting about Star Crash was the fact that the guys who were supposed to be the good guys were really the bad guys in the story.
Yeah.
And the guys that they were fighting, that they defeated in the end, were actually the good guys.
Right, yeah.
You know, and the filmmakers did that on purpose to see if anyone in the audience was smart enough to figure this out.
Yeah.
You know, and I thought that was kind of clever. You know,
That's
in a
good.
cheesy Star Wars ripoff.
And let's not forget, if we got to bring up Star Crash, we have to bring up the great line from Star Crash.
Stop the flow of
time.
time.
Yeah. So when we get backed into a corner, Christopher Plummer, when we get painted into a corner, as the was that Deus Ex Machina? How do you say that or whatever?
where the
God in the Machine. He says, he just says, okay, I have the power to stop and reverse time. He just kind of holds up his hand at one point and says, let's just go back. And
2 minutes.
2 minutes, and everybody else is going to be frozen except for the good guys somehow.
Yeah.
We're going to be allowed to go around.
They don't
and blow
explain
up.
that.
They don't explain any of this, of course. Comes up, you know, at the last second. But so anyway, Star Crash. Yeah,
Wow.
Star Crash is my highest recommendation. Also, great pick, Tyler. One of my favorite
Well,
movies.
you know, one thing I liked about Star Crash was the fact that they grabbed two people that are hardened criminals, you know, to go on this important mission to rescue the
yeah.
Emperor's son. And I'm like, these guys are more likely to join the other
Yeah.
side than they are.
No,
to-
there's
to-
good, there's
to
good
save
stuff. I mean,
you,
it wasn't
you know?
just. I mean, it's like even that back then. I mean, I'll tell a quick story, Josh, and we'll
Sure.
bring it into your movie.
You guys talked me into it. I got to see this.
a couple years ago, living out in Portland, Oregon, right? And my brother and I, they were going to show Kroll, okay, which is obviously going to
Which
be
is a
one,
guilty
which is
pleasure of
one
mine,
for a
too.
future. That'll be one for a future show, but. They were going to show Kroll, which is a great 1983 cheeseball sci-fi /
They're
science
trying
fiction
to do Star Wars
cross
meets
with
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the point is,
Guts.
But the
Gutsy.
point is, not to bring it up, but my point in bringing it up is, we go into this dollar theater, what I call the dollar theater, second run theaters, which they have tons of in Portland. It's a great movie. And we had this whole audience full of like stoned 20-somethings, young kids who were just hipper than you know. And we're just in there, and we're just there because this was going to be cheesy fun, you know. And when Kroll starts, they were all laughing at Kroll, shouting out at the screen, making fun of the screen. All these jokes are going on, laughing at everything, you know. And, which it deserves. But the funny thing happened was, as Kroll went on, they got Krolled. They got they got sucked into it because the 20-somethings from this era are so used to crap that comes out. Even something like Star Crash or Kroll is going to be better written than your average movie that comes out today. There was actual characters. They actually cared about the characters. They tried to do something about characters. You compare that with some piece of
Flock.
Right.
like Transformers 2, when it's
Yeah.
just completely an exercise in marketing. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
A 2-hour TV toy commercial.
That's and so it's like it was so funny because it's like all these like little hipsters. They actually
This is
started
actually much better.
you know, they shut up and started watching the movie.
You're getting
after
into the
a while.
plot line because there was an attempt at a story.
So,
in
yeah,
that.
so
There's a
it's like-
structure there. that
Yeah, there's
works.
a structure there that works, and that there was also writing there that works, and actors that cared.
Yeah, and I
You're not able
I-
to lean on what is essentially, like in this case of Transporters, a series of special effects sequences
that are so overwhelming
Yep.
that you're just using those as a tentpoles, and you don't really.
And there's
need
no
anything
plot
else.
at all.
Yeah.
Zero, nothing. But
What do you think, Josh? What do you think? What do you want to bring up?
Oh, I would like to bring up another John Borman who did Zardoz movie.
Okay, so we got sort of the Shatner Borman episode.
Yeah.
yeah.
1981's Excalibur,
Excalibur.
which
yeah.
is a swords and
yeah.
sorcery movie
Another great
based
one.
on
Yeah.
the French writer Thomas Mallory, and it's sort of a
I
series
like
of
that one
tableaus.
too, Josh. Good job.
Good, thank you. And it's got a fantastic cast of. It's kind of a who's who of Where Are They Now.
Absolutely. You know,
sci-fi.
and
Hey,
you know
he's
what I
in
like?
first film.
One of his first films. He's also in Kroll. Just as a side. But,
Boy, he picked some winners early on,
you know,
didn't he?
and, what's the guy? What's his name? At Merlin. I'm trying to think. Nicole Williams as Merlin.
Okay.
Nicole Williams,
Yep.
who was he was in a Columbo. That's awesome. If you think about this, is just a real quick thing I'll say. If you get any of the Lord of the Rings audio books where you read the complete unabridged in the '80s, Nicole Williams did all of
British
those.
actor
So it's
with
like it's like those are great to listen to if you're a fan of Excalibur, if you like Excalibur or Nicole Merlin in that movie, because he does all the voices. So you get him doing basically the whole Lord of the Rings. But anyway, go on and talk about Excalibur.
You had mentioned the actor, Merlin, and his voice, his portrayal in that movie. That's one of the central underpinnings that makes it such a strong. I mean,
he's a great actor who really is one of these guys that kind of got lost in the shuffle over the years. You know what I mean?
I read that Borman had originally wanted to do a Lord of the Rings type adaptation, and he ended up settling on. He couldn't get the rights, or something happened on this Excalibur story, and
public domain.
Yeah, maybe so. What you have is a really strange admixture of what feels at times like sci-fi, and then there's religious allegory.
Right.
There's a bunch of brutal fighting in armor.
Yeah.
I love the music in Excalibur, though. Wasn't that great?
Yeah.
And it had its moments,
Wagner.
too.
There isn't any time. I mean, it's like, and again, what we have here is, you have these things that the influence of Star Wars at the time was so strong that even Star Wars creeps into the story of King Arthur. Yeah, it's like when the swords hit, there's like the sparks, like you would get with the lightsabers, and stuff like that, and
like the
you're
scene
right.
with who was it? Who's Arthur's best friend, Lancelot, where he meets him and fights him. It's like the Obi-Wan Kenobi scene.
Exactly. There's some of that. There's some of that.
Defeats him and he comes back to life.
Well, you can definitely see the fingerprints of it on it. You know what I mean? You can definitely see how it was of that time.
Yeah.
Everything kind of on that.
I kind of list that as a guilty pleasure because it's an interesting failure. But there are moments of it you can learn as a person. Important lessons, like the whole thing of where Arthur talks to this guy who's a baron, and and Merlin is guiding him through the negotiation. He's like, he has given you something, you must give him something too. And I learned from that. It wasn't just, let's have another fantastical, allegorical special effect after another.
The character of Merlin has his powers may come from he's living backwards in time, so he's actually,
so he can see the future.
He sees the future only by virtue of having already been there.
Benjamin Button.
Now is that for just this movie, or was that supposed to be
the
way
that
comes
from?
Was that in the real? That's the real thing. Okay.
And that's been increased on reiteration.
God, that's weird. But I can't. That's just.
But he keeps getting over time. He keeps getting younger while everyone gets older.
He becomes less powerful. So we start off in the Mythic Age, and we're ending up more in the Bronze and Science Christian era. And in the end, he actually vanishes.
His powers are dying out, and man, that stuff just makes my head hurt.
And in a society that's so lacking in modern myths, to my adolescent mind, just the ideas in that, the concept. We get into the Grail at the end, and there's so many movements to that. The denigration of Arthur, and then his healing by the Grail, and it has mythic resonance that's more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, more than some of its parts. I think maybe that's another great thing to maybe think about with these. In some perverse end around way, they end up being more than the sum of their parts. Something magic happens by accident in these movies, I think. A lot of them that reaches across the years and that holds on to you, grabs a little part of your brain, doesn't let go. And you like going back to that place. You know what I'm saying? As weird and messed up as it was.
It's strangely comforting to revisit these
things. It
is.
They're very comfortable. Like I said, they're very uplifting and comforting for some reason.
And there are moments in Excalibur, they're some of my favorite in cinema, where they're riding on the horses and they're wearing that armor and they're playing that sweeping music. And I'm just thinking about it, I'm getting goosebumps. It's like, wow, I was just so blown away by that moment.
It was one of the first uses of that famous piece that I can't remember the name of now, but it has the choral part and it sounds very ancient. And that's been repeated and used so much.
Conan, others,
Conan used it, okay. Is that the one that...
Well, no, I think Conan ripped it off, but I mean, it sounds like I know the one he's talking about.
They used it afterwards.
He's used it on like trailers and stuff like that for years.
Conan had a sound-alike thing.
Yeah, Conan had a sound-alike thing.
But just not to forget that movie had some really strange stuff, especially in the first act. There's sort of the rape scene with the armor on that ends up being unintentionally maybe almost humorous. There's some really odd stuff.
Off stuff.
And the grossness of the crow eating the eyeball that apparently they waited for days with the film running to get that shot of a crow actually eating a sheep's eyeball.
Oh my God. There's a bunch of stuff in there that's like I said, there's kind of ugly stuff in all these movies. They're ugly movies in some respects. They're not pretty movies. I mean, some of them, in some ways they are, in some ways they aren't.
We're coming out of a jaded post-Vietnam Reaganomics era on some of these.
But not only that, it's like, if you're dealing with some, let's take a movie like Impulse, for example, the one I brought up earlier. They had a certain amount of money to make that movie. They couldn't wait for a blue sky. You know what I mean? If it was gray and crappy out,
They shot it anyway.
that's
forget
where they
it.
shot
Yeah.
it. You know, I think a lot of these movies,
Like a
they
Corman film, yeah.
they reflect that. You know, they reflect that sort of grittiness and real life edge, the ones that are sort of based in the real world.
Yeah.
That also creeps into, though, the fantasy element. So, because again, they just weren't able to quite get there. I think on some of these. Now, Excalibur is an exception. Dune, obviously, they had as much money as they wanted. I think Excalibur, they probably had as much money as they wanted.
I think the directors
But-
ended up on both those. They knew they didn't have final cut going into it.
Yeah.
And yet they still went ahead with sort of dealing with the devil that the studio
And the result was somewhat disastrous.
mixed. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
mixed.
Listen, folks.
You have
listen.
another Shatner one, don't you?
Well, no, I think we're going to be out of time because I want to allow for some time for everybody to see some of these movies. And listen, we'll be back next time with another edition of Bad Movies. I'd like to thank
Well,
my
we got 10
guests.
minutes left, don't we?
Well, we do and we don't. We do and we don't. Not really. Not
Oh,
really.
because we're going to cut some clips?
We're going to put the clips in, right. So we're going to put the clips in. So when this is out, you guys will see the clips, which is going to be part of the show. And so I'd just like to thank Tyler and Josh.
Thanks.
Good job, guys.
Let's do
And
this again.
we'll come back someday, sooner or later.
So watch Turkey shoot Escape 2000.
Okay, so next time, a couple of things that we're going to do. Escape 2000, and I will bring up, what should I bring up?
Was there one more Shatner that you were going to feature?
Yeah, maybe White Comanche would be a good one.
We're talking about John Carpenter.
Or Big Trouble in Little China.
Big
could
Trouble
be
in
on
Little
the
China. I was
horizon.
thinking also
Yep.
Escape from New York. You know,
Escape from New York could be, although that was pretty successful. That was more
but
maybe.
it was an accidental success. This was the thing. The title of the film was Escape from New York: The Death of Snake Plissken. Originally, they were going to kill off Snake.
They're going to kill off Snake.
So-
Okay,
so-
we'll get into it next time. Next time.
Save it for
Save it.
Yeah.
Anyway, folks, listen, everybody out there, you have a great day, and I thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Bad Movies.
That was good. Thanks.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think.